get going, and then Rick, when you have to go, you go. John's not here with us yet, but let me call the meeting to order. So I officially call the meeting to order as an open meeting of the Broadcasting Board of Governors being held in compliance with the Sunshine Act. Digital recording of this meeting will be available for on-demand viewing on the BBG website, bbg.gov. I'm honored to be joined here by Governors Armstrong, Crocker, and Kepner. Unfortunately, Governors Kornblue and Governors Weinstein cannot join us today. On the phone, we have Governor Undersecretary Rick Stengel. He's at the 2016 Global Entrepreneurship Summit at Stanford University. And thank you very much, Rick, for joining us. I know you're busy out there. The presence of 5 or more governors satisfied the board's quorum requirement, and a quorum is present here. The board may conduct business based on majority vote. Let's do two quick votes and then go on to the business of the board. So on June 9th, the board received by email the consent agenda. I didn't get any comments. The consent agenda consisted of minutes from the last meeting, a resolution honoring the VOA's Armenian service, Georgian and Bosnian services, and a resolution honoring the 15th anniversary of RFERL Balkan Services Macedonian Unit. So I'd like to ask a governor if they would like to propose that we approve the consent agenda. Matt Armstrong moves. Michael Kepner seconds. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The consent agenda carries. Yesterday, we got a very good briefing from John Lansing, who has joined us, and his team on the fiscal year 2016 Internet Freedom Spend Plan. As you recall, John and his team have done a lot of work at the board's directive, putting in a structure in place to oversee the spending on Internet Freedom Fund spending, and to put a structure in place by which we approve and are told about things. And based on that briefing, we feel we're ready to approve or at least vote on the 2016 Internet Freedom Spend Plan so that the money can be released. Do any governors wish to move that we approve the 2016 Internet Freedom Spend Plan? Matt Armstrong moves. I second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The Internet Freedom Spend Plan for 2016 is approved. Congratulations, Libby and Andre, wherever you guys are. So, I just congratulated you, Libby. We just approved your spend plan. It's a rainy day here in D.C., so traffic is a bit brutal, which is why all of us came in just in time, so I apologize. So, Rick, stay on as long as you want, or feel free to go. We appreciate you dialing in for this.
I wish I could be there, and I know it will be a great meeting, and good luck with everything. I am going to sign off now. It's a beautiful day here in San Francisco. So,
Rick. Thank you, Rick. So now we can slow down a little bit and deal with the rest of the items of the board. I believe that Governor Aaron may be calling in at some point.
Yes, I am. Good morning.
Welcome, Governor Aaron. So we still have a quorum, believe it or not, on the phone. Leon, just because you weren't here when I called the roll quickly, did you get to vote on either of the two items?
No.
Okay, so we'll circle back with you on that. But we just approved the consent agenda. We just approved the 2016 Internet Freedom Spend Plan based on our briefing yesterday. Okay, so. I can take a deep breath here. As many of you know, Congress is at a high point of activity this year. I'm reading these words here, but I'm not sure that that's an appropriate way to put it. Anyway, there's been a flurry of activity at the end of the year, and one of the things that has happened is that Congressman Mac Thornberry introduced an amendment to the House version of the 2016 NDAA, or National Defense Authorization Act, that would seek a number of changes to the structure and composition of the BBG. And some of these are quite major, and that NDAA passed the House of Representatives along with that amendment. Separately, the Senate passed their own version of an NDAA without any language regarding BBG in their authorization. So there's going to be a conference, and in that conference, this obviously will be one of the issues discussed, since it's one of the issues that the two bills differ on. There's no assurance that we won't go to continuing resolution, right? And there'll be an agreement, and there's also a possibility that there will be an agreement. So we as a board feel that we have been discussing this, and we feel that that we need to and want to take a position on the legislation, what we're in favor of and what we're opposed to. So along with our staff and John's team, we're hard at work on formulating our position on the pieces of legislation that we support and want to get behind. We're not ready yet to finalize that. We're still working on it. But what I thought we'd do is, I wanted to acknowledge that this is something the board is not taking lightly. We're doing a lot of work on it and really trying to figure out what the implications are of the various provisions, and we like a lot in there, and we're still looking at a lot in there. But the second thing I wanted to do was, as we are in the middle of this process, just open it up and see if any of the governors have any comments they want to make today in the open meeting about the legislation. Governor Kempner.
In no way ever to contradict my chairman, but
Feel free.
Yeah, there are provisions in there that, depending on how they are defined, we may like, and some depending how they may find that we may not like. But we are diligently working to figure out both those two sides of the coin.
Agreed. Any other governors? Governor Armstrong, Governor Crocker?
These are weighty matters that will require considerable deliberation from the board. I look forward to being part of that process. Certainly have nothing to offer now.
Simply echoing what has been said.
I'm very much.
Oh, I'm sorry, Leon. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, just only to reiterate what I said yesterday.
We can't hear you, Leon, unfortunately.
Okay, can you hear me now?
A little bit better.
Okay, I have mic right next to me. Hold on. No, everything in the volume I think is. Okay,
no, we can hear you. We can hear you perfectly. Go ahead, Leon.
Okay.
But then mute yourself afterwards.
Of course. So to reiterate off the bat, and then I don't have to really say much after this. I'm very happy and relieved that we've come pretty close to crystallizing several, I think 4 or 5 consensus points, which I fully support. Beyond that, I'm with Ryan on this, that we need to elaborate and delve into it. On the other hand, again, my sense is to caution against excessive deliberation, simply because it may be that beyond those points of consensus, I don't see a way of expressing other reservations or points of support that don't enjoy sort of the general support, the support of the majority or everybody on the board. Simply, I just don't see how that could be done. So that beyond that, I'm happy to listen in, but that is generally my position.
Great, thank you, Leon. And let me just conclude by saying that I'm reminiscing a little bit yesterday. It's now, I think, my 4th year sitting at this table, and I look around the table, and I look around the room outside of the table, and I'm just, hey, Leon, we're getting a lot of feedback. If you can mute.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Right. Hold on a second.
Yeah. Starting with John, looking at our grantee heads, who've worked so well this year, our new leadership at VOA, not just Amanda, but Sandy and Kaylu, your team, John. I mean, we just are rolling here as an organization, and we've got a lot of important things to do as an organization that have nothing to do with legislation, because there's a lot of issues in the world, and we can play a big role on that. And probably not being as impactful as we could be given the potential in this room. And so what I think, and I probably believe I speak for the whole board, and what we're trying to play a role in the legislation of being is that we memorialize the things that are working really, really well now, which is just about everything, and we don't, for unintended or intended reasons, create things that make it harder to do for the next board and the next leadership to do the great things that are being done. So we're trying to be very careful here and very thoughtful here, and I appreciate the work on the board. We've had some nice disagreements behind closed doors, which is good for any healthy board, right? And what we want to do as a board is support the people here in this room that are doing really the hard work, and the people outside of this room that are doing the hard and dangerous work. So that's our goal as a board, to be helpful as opposed to be obstructionist. So, thank the board for their work on this. We're continuing to formulate that position, and we'll go on from there. So any other comments, board or John, on the legislation, or should we move on? Great. Okay. Let me get back to the business. I'd like to start with something much more important than the legislation, and recognize the loss of one of the members of the BBG family. Zina Cavallou passed unexpectedly at home on May 14th, 2016 at the age of 49 years old. And while the entire BBG family mourns her loss, we look back fondly and remember Zina as a supportive coworker and a wonderful friend. She was instrumental in ensuring that the BBG board was able to successfully carry out live webcasts of its meetings, working behind the scenes to keep the show moving. I at the very early days, was probably one of the only ones listening to the webcast, so I have a personal feeling here. And she was also a foundational pillar for the technological progress and growth of VOA's Chiron graphics, including helping programmers at Chiron Corporation to develop Persian, Khmer, and Urdu language capabilities for VOA. Zina was a key part of the BBG family and a friend to so many in the Cohen building and beyond, and I'd like to ask that we observe a quick moment of silence for Zina Cavallou. Thank you. As you know, at the start of every board meeting, we outline threats to the press around the world. Before I do that, we have some good news, which is very rare in this portion of the board meeting. I'd like to report on the release of Hadija Ismailova. On May 25th, we were pleased to learn that Azerbaijan's Supreme Court suspended the jail sentence of Hadija, an award-winning investigative journalist and RFRL contributor. She had been in a Baku prison for nearly 18 months as part of a 7.5-year sentence for retaliation for her government corruption reports. We want to recognize the assistance and support of Hadija from many outside organizations, Congress, the State Department, NGOs, and others who pressed her case in public and in private. The need for this support continues because Hadija isn't truly free yet. Her suspended sentence comes with a 5-year ban on traveling outside the country. We urge authorities to clear her name and remove the travel restrictions, and we also call for the immediate reopening of our bureau, RFRL's bureau in Baku, which has been closed since December of 2014. While we welcome positive progress on Hadija's case, we are dismayed that the 1-year anniversary of the detention of RFRL's correspondent in Turkmenistan, Saparmamed Sepeskuliev, I practiced this before. Saparmamed, I know your first name, but your last name's a struggle for me. So it's just around the corner, July 7th. We, as the members of the BBG, believe that his imprisonment is unlawful and demand his release. Saparmamed courageously reported on economic development, infrastructure, social services, and education in Turkmenistan's western regions. His goal was to inform citizens about the challenges facing their communities and help them improve their lives. On July 2015, Saparmamed was detained and held incommunicado before being convicted of fabricated narcotics charges and sentenced to 3 years in prison in closed proceedings in a Turkmenistan court on August 31st, 2015. The BBG is dedicated to promoting and protecting media freedom, and we vigorously support our journalists around the world as part of that commitment. Saparmamed, working in some of the world's most restrictive conditions to serve the public interest, has been arbitrarily imprisoned and deserves his freedom immediately, and we call for his immediate release. Since our last meeting, there's been several attacks on VOA journalists in the Middle East, Africa, and South Asia. 2 VOA Turkish reporters were assaulted and hospitalized while covering a car bomb in Turkey. In Angola, a VOA correspondent was roughed up by police and detained without cause. He had been doing a story on police corruption, and VOA journalists were beaten and harassed in separate incidents in Pakistan and Iraqi Kurdistan. In the case of the latter, I'm encouraged to report that the Kurdistan Regional Security Agency issued a formal apology to VOA and VOA's Kurdish service for the attack. We call on authorities in Turkey, Pakistan, and Angola to similarly hold these attackers accountable. Elsewhere, BBG journalists have faced harassment, intimidation, and threats in Crimea, Moldova, Kazakhstan, and Iraq. We denounce these and all threats made to journalists in an effort to silence them, and we will not be deterred from bringing uncensored news and information to people living under these oppressive regimes. Let me turn to the public comment. As you know, the board permits members of the public who register to attend our open meetings the opportunity to speak for up to 3 minutes. We had a bit of a problem with our online registration, but I think we've sorted it out now. So I apologize to anybody who tried to register today that somehow ran into those problems. 3 very enterprising souls were able to make it through the problems and actually sign up. Ann Noonan, Adam Powell, and Melody Opakadaka. So let's start with Ann. Why don't you come to the table and give your report?
Thank you, Chairman Schell. My name is Ann Noonan. I'm the Executive Director for the Committee for U.S. International Broadcasting. This is my first meeting that I've attended since the death of Harry Wu, founder of the Laogai Research Foundation. His work was well known by many VOA and RFA media journalists and reporters, and like to extend a continued invitation to everyone here is welcome to the Laogai Museum, which is located here in D.C. You're all encouraged and welcome to come and visit the museum. This is also my first meeting here with the new VOA director in place, so on behalf of CUSIB, I'd like to officially welcome Amanda Bennett. I look forward to establishing a working relationship with you. A little history about my organization includes our efforts to force the BBG to welcome the public to attend these meetings and then to be permitted to speak at the meetings. With a little help from former BBG Governor Victor Ashe, we were successful in this effort. Nevertheless, as Chair Schell just said, until yesterday when I reached out to Chairman Jeff Schell, I remained waited list to attend today's meeting. The chairman helped me, and so I'm here today. While Chairman Schell publicly encourages people to attend and speak, it looks to me like the BBG staff may see things differently. I prefer to limit those in attendance, so I recommend that the sign-up process be run differently so people can feel welcome and engaged with the BBG, not remain on a waiting list for an event in a room with empty seats. And please know that when I tried to sign up, there wasn't even an option to speak. So again, thank you. The last time I spoke at a BBG meeting, I posed some questions but never received any response from the board members. These were not intended as rhetorical questions. I believe the point of public participation at these meetings isn't for the BBG board to endure listening to the public's comments, but to respond to the public inquiries. So here are the questions again. Can any governor here at this table assure CUSIB that radio broadcasts into China will be protected, especially since we all know that the crackdown on internet users inside China is causing the arrest and imprisonment of Chinese freedom fighters, Roman Catholics, Tibetans, people of other faith, democracy seekers, and women who don't want to be forcibly aborted? This question remained unanswered, although there was a strange Q&A between Mr. Stengel, Mr. Armstrong, and Mr. Mendez that touched on the topic. For the record, there is no way to accurately report how many people inside China or Tibet listen to shortwave or medium wave radio. If they admitted they listened, they would be arrested. CUSIB would like to request for the public to have access to ICC meeting minutes and for these meetings to be open to the public. In the spirit of transparency in government, we'd like to know what transpires at these meetings, and we would like for these meetings to be live streamed and accessible to the general public. Is this possible? Finally, we'd like to request for speaking time for the public to be extended from 3 minutes to 5 minutes. Is this possible? Thank you.
Thanks, Ann. And sorry again for the problem signing up. I think we've got it sorted out, but we'll be more diligent at future meetings. Adam, your turn. Kind of step up to the table. Adam Powell from USC.
Thank you, Chairman Schell, Director Lansing, governors, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Adam Clayton Powell III. I'm president of the Public Diplomacy Council, and I'm director of Washington programs for the USC Annenberg Center for Communication Leadership and Policy. The views I present are my own and not of those organizations. Words. We use them so often we may not really hear them or their music. You here in this building appreciate their power. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States of America. Words. Words for which people risked prison and worse because they were more than just words. People once traveled long distances to hear words. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. They came for the words and stayed for the music. A century later, people traveled an even greater distance to hear. When we allow freedom to ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last. They came for the words and stayed for the music. Every night in New York City, people pay thousands of dollars apiece to hear the Federalist Papers performed on stage. The Federalist Papers. Federalist Papers were dropped from school curricula years ago because of a lack of interest. Just words, but those words today power a billion-dollar Broadway hit, The Founding of the United States, set to music, quoting Run DMC and Jay-Z. 45,000 copies of the recording were sold last week, making it the third most popular music in America. Come to think of it, of the people, by the people, for the people, has a nice beat and a sort of catchy rhyme. Honest Abe as the Fresh Prez. Just words, but words for which people risk prison and worse. Many people in this building and some in this room once worked for newspapers or broadcasters. The difference between working in those former jobs and working here is this. Today and every day, just to read or listen to the words produced in this building, people risk prison and worse, precisely because the words produced in this building are more than just words. Thank you.
So it's thank you. Our policy not to, as a board in the public forum, respond directly to public speakers, but I do have to say that I saw Hamilton on Tuesday night, and it is spectacular. And I did not pay thousands of dollars because I was fortunate enough my wife got tickets 6 months ago at Ticketmaster. So it does make you proud to be an American, and it does show you the power of words. Interesting passage in that where Washington keeps Hamilton as his chief of staff because he appreciates he thinks his writing will be stronger than his acumen on the battlefield, where Hamilton wants to go, command a battalion, but Washington says you're more valuable here with your pen than you'd be with a bayonet. So it's anyway. Thank you, Adam. Not to endorse the play, I have no financial interest in it, but it is spectacular. Melody here? Oh, Melody signed up, but I don't see her. Nope. Okay. Hopefully Melody will come back at the next meeting. And my dream here, and per your comment, is to get 10 people here at some point. So let's keep working on that to try to fill the public comment. Let me turn it over, John. It's your turn to the CEO's report. And John, why don't you give us a quick update of what's happened since the last board meeting?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Schell. Good morning, everybody, and welcome. I'd like to start off the report today by going around to the ICC and the 5 entities for some brief reports on the activity that has gone on since our last meeting. I'd like to start with VOA. As you pointed out, we have a new leadership team at VOA. We introduced Amanda Bennett at our last meeting, and we also since then added a deputy director of the VOA named Sandy Sugawara, who's not here today. She's on assignment. And those 2 women joined Kelu Chow. And the 3 of those leaders have formed a very strong strategic alliance with one another in the advancement of improvements at Voice of America. And I believe it's true. If it's not, somebody can tell me that it's the only national, international news organization run by 3 women. And so we're very proud of that fact because they're 3 very accomplished women, beginning with Amanda Bennett. So Amanda, do you want to lead us off with a quick update on Voice of America?
Yes, John, thank you so much. And thank you for that tribute to Sandy, because she is off working on a State Department-sponsored technology conference, and she's just diving in and doing a fantastic job covering it and also picking up things that she will be bringing to VOA. So thank you so much. Before I start, I'd like to introduce some visitors we have here. We have here a delegation from our Latin American affiliates, and I just want to point out that using our affiliate model, we have developed extremely close working relationships with our Latin American visitors. And our Latin American division has 17% of the market in the countries that they serve of people 18 and over. And the affiliates that are visiting here represent 50% of that audience. So very quickly, I would like to recognize Amada Castañón from Mexico City and TV Azteca, Enma Calderon from Tegucigalpa, Honduras, from Mundo TV, Andrea Ramirez from San Jose, Costa Rica, from CB24, Jofrana Gonzalez from Bogota, Colombia, from Cabo Noticias.
Amanda, I think they may have had to step out for a separate meeting, so you can keep going and recognize them. They're in town, but I want to just make sure. Yeah, I want to make sure we recognize them, but they did have another thing that was more pressing at the moment. So.
I see. I just checked 5 minutes ago that they were here, so I apologize.
Keep recognizing them.
I will
it'll
keep
be
recognizing them.
The good thing is you can see this later on the web, so they can all watch it.
Jorge Ivan Melo from Quito, Ecuador, of Teleamazonas. Roxana Coronado from Lima, Peru, Andina de Televisión. Pablo Vázquez from Santiago, Chile, Televisión Nacional de Chile. And Ana Clara Felice from RTR, Argentina. Thank you in absentia, all of you. Thank you. So quickly, I'd like to just run down the first 60 plus days that I've been here. And I'd like to say that in my first 60 days, I've discovered a place of amazing hidden talents and strengths, and a remarkable willingness and, in fact, eagerness to change, to liberate those talents and strengths. So we've started doing a few things to point us in the direction of our goal of becoming faster moving and to recognize our mission. And just as one example, I would like to say that very shortly after the tragedy in Orlando, we are sponsoring next week at the museum a panel discussion with Muslim millennials talking about their challenges and their opportunities here, and I think it will be a very robust discussion. So we're trying to very quickly respond to news events with these kinds of things. I found that Voice of America, in fact, has a very robust and very strong mission that does distinguish us from many other news organizations. And our mission is, 1, to be an objective news source in countries where they have no other. 2, to tell America's stories in ways that our audiences can relate to, focusing on the things that people outside the United States found appealing and compelling about the United States culture and civilization, such as technology, entrepreneurialism, education, medicine, and women's issues. And the third, which I think is an equally important, if not more important, that is becoming an authentic voice of America's diaspora communities, both enabling us to link back effectively with the countries that these people have come here from, and also telling one of America's most compelling stories, and that is the stories of the people who make up this country. So real quickly, I'd just like to point out a couple of things we've done. We're going to be dry running, testing what I find is going to be I hope, a very exciting platform. We're calling it Global Town Hall. So at the 2 presidential conventions, we are going to be testing out a platform using Facebook Live that will enable us to broadcast from a single source and speak to people in Persian, Chinese, Russian, and Spanish, all at a single time in simultaneous translation. We think that will be a very powerful tool in our efforts to reach into those markets. Sandy has started a mobile task force as part of our effort to rapidly adopt digital technology. You will be hearing later from the head of our extremism desk, which is a small group of people fluent in a dozen appropriate languages who are compiling and distributing worldwide incidents of extremism and stories out of those areas that nobody else has access to. And we also piloted a video series on American political language, which helps people understand the kind of shorthand that we use here in American political systems. It's it's going to be quite an interesting video series. And so, working with Deputy Director Sandy Sugawara and Associate Director Kelu Chow, we are very close to using the help of a large and growing number of people within VOA to launch a really ambitious and wide-ranging series of changes that we hope will bring us much, much closer to our ability to execute the mission that we find so important. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Any questions for Amanda? Comments? Matt?
Comment. Thank you for being here, and Sandy as well.
We are so excited we can barely stand it.
Okay, speaking of strong, wonderful leadership that happened to be female, I'd like to ask Malule Gonzalez, our sort of new, not so new, but still in her first year, leader for the Office of Cuba Broadcasting. Please go ahead, Malule.
Thank you, John, and hello to the board and everyone watching through the streaming. For OCB, we wanted to share some highlights that we have included in our new digital newsletter called OCB in a Flash. You all have a hard copy of it. And as you can see in it, we briefly describe various initiatives and projects that we're currently working on. Yo Soy El Cambio vignettes. We just commissioned this project in Cuba to Cuban filmmakers that will be producing this for us. These vignettes will highlight people that are pursuing change and making the difference. The Yo Soy El Cambio initiative will also include an animated series for learning to speak English, a priority now for Cubans as expressed by Cubans on island. Also in this issue, there's info on a new program between OCB and VOA Latam. Due to the current situation in Venezuela and the significance for Cuba, at OCB we started producing a weekly program called Venezuela en Crisis. We co-produce it with VOA Latam and they distribute to their affiliates. On Radio Marti, we're proud to announce that we will debut on July 11th a self-help show called Doctora Isabel, very well known for U.S. Hispanics, with Cuban psychologist Doctora Isabel. The show will air live and we'll be taking calls from Cuban listeners. With the internet plan just approved, we are happy and pleased to announce the first Cuba Internet Freedom Conference hosted by OCB that will take place in Miami, Florida, September 12 and 13 as part of Social Media Week, Miami. And last but not least is the coverage that we're doing of the Cuban migration crisis through Latin America. As many of you are aware, thousands of Cubans have been migrating through Colombia, Ecuador, Panama, and different countries on their way to the U.S., and many have fallen into an immigration limbo, not to mention the conditions they're living. We'll hear more of this on the Impact panel today. Natalia will share a lot of the stories that our correspondent were able to do while they were visiting the Cubans in the island. Okay.
Thank you, Malule. Any questions for Malule, governors? Okay.
Thank you.
So I'd like to move to RFERL, and before we move to the report for RFERL, I'd like to do one introduction and one recognition. So I'll start with an introduction. Mr. Thomas Kent has been appointed our new president and CEO of RFERL. Tom comes after a career spanning 40 plus years at the Associated Press, where he managed the Moscow bureau at one point. He's standards and practices editor in the most recent stint. He's also a scholar, a Russian-speaking scholar, an author, and a professor who has speaking assignments all over the world. He's also known as a and a media ethicist and journalistic ethicist. So he brings a great deal of journalistic experience, management experience, and high ethical reputation. So Tom, welcome to the BBG and welcome to your position at Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's a great honor for me. I thank you for selecting me in Prague and in Washington. I have been very impressed in the first few days with the professionalism and the skill and the esprit de corps of the RFE-RL staff. And I look forward very much to working with the governors and the other broadcast entities and the entire staff of the BBG as we move forward at RFE-RL. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Welcome. So in terms of a presentation, I'd like to recognize Nenad Pejk, who has been the acting CEO and president for the better part of a year. In that role, he was also continuing as editor-in-chief during that period and vice president. So he's essentially was working in 3 positions. And to be clear, the work that Nenad did in his leadership wasn't to hold the organization steady, it was to drive it forward. And you'll hear in his report shortly some of the exciting digital innovations and the innovation of a new 24/7 satellite stream in Russian language that really will become a hallmark of our media strategy in Eastern Europe that will be, I think, widely followed and widely admired. But before we get to that report, Nenad, I would ask if you could come forward. We would like to recognize your service as acting president and CEO. So, the plaque reads, "For outstanding effort, creativity, leadership, and initiative, and extraordinary contributions to furthering the mission of the BBG as RFE-RL Interim Chief Executive while maintaining his full-time responsibilities as Vice President and Editor-in-Chief to inform, engage, and connect people around the world in support of freedom and democracy. Thank you for your service."
I'll take it.
Oh, sure?
Oh, yes, I am. Oh, I was not aware I was so good. I have just 2 points to make. First of all, thank you, of course. The first point I want to tell is a little bit personal. When I decided to leave Sarajevo, the city under the siege and the country in the war, in 1992, I was left with nothing. Literally speaking, nothing. I had 1 bag. And in that bag, I had, by the way, 7 towels. Strange thing what kind of stuff people take when they run away. I joined the European Institute for the Media in Manchester at that time, and they asked me to organize a conference called Media Shared Responsibility for the War. I did organize it, and I had no clue that at the meeting was present director of Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. And a few months later, I got a call to join RFE-RL, established Balkan service, and I got everything back. I have more bags, more than 1 bag today. I got my profession back, dignity, even the country. So thank you, and this is why I think I need to. It's my payback time. You know, I pay my debt to RFE-RL. The second point I want to make. I don't know, did people outside of this room notice, but what we are getting lately within USIM, we are getting people appointed who are very high professional people appointed, not political appointees. This raised the bar dramatically, I'm sure, within USIM, and Tom Kent is one of them. So it's going to be a pleasure to work with him in the future, and of course, he will have my 100% support. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Nenad.
Let me just quickly jump in and go back to John for a second, but I want to add my congratulations to Tom Kent and thanks to coming to join us. What's great about working around BBG right now is we have great teams all over the place, not just great people. And I think the Tom Nenad team will be one of the most unrivaled teams that we have. So it's going to be fun to watch you guys do what you're doing. And Nenad, do you have any of the towels left, or are they all gone?
More than 7.
Okay, John, back to you.
Okay, I'm going to call an audible here, if that's okay, Chairman Shell and Amanda. Since the team that you introduced wasn't here and now they've entered the room, would you like to do just another quick introduction of the affiliate group? Push your mic on. You can just do a broad introduction, not by name, I think.
Yes, thank you all for being here. We prematurely introduced you to the board before you arrived here, so I'm sorry about that, but here we go. I would like to recognize the people who represent 50% of VOA's total audience who are here in the room, and I will go through again the names of the people who are here and welcome you all. One is Amada Castañon from Mexico City, from TV Azteca. Enma Calderon from Tegucigalpa, Honduras, with Mundo TV. Andrea Ramirez from San Jose, Costa Rica, who is from CB24. Jofrana Gonzalez from Bogota, Colombia, and she is from Cabo Noticias. Jorge Ivan Melo from Quito, Ecuador, from Teleamazonas. And Roxana Coronado from Lima, Peru, of Andina de Televisión. And Pablo Vasquez from Santiago, Chile, from Televisión Nacional de Chile. And Ana Clara Felice from Artear in Argentina. And I'd like to welcome you for the second time here. Thank you.
Very good. So I didn't mention Tom Kent's starting date is actually on Monday, I believe, the 27th. So we'll let Nenad take over the report for RFERL. Nenad, please.
Thank you. I want to mention only one issue that we are working on is the satellite stream in Russian. We are going to launch 6-7 hours of regional programming in September. On July 7th, we are getting a high-profile consultant coming to Prague, Brooke Johnson. Many of you know her. This is the lady who launched History Channel and made huge success with the Food Channel. She's going to help us to defining the channel, scheduling, promo, branding issue. We are, of course, number 2, working with VOA above all, many programs that we are going to have there together or share with each other, etc. Number 3, we also already translated Delusional Paradise in Russian. So we are going to broadcast it as well. And talks to the cable providers are going very well so far. We signed cable providers in 4 countries. 6 countries already agreed to take it. Now there's email exchange between us and them, actually between IBB office and them. Great work by Adam, you know that, in Prague and your office there. And we have 13 countries scheduled to talk to in July. So also, thanks to IBB, I hope we are going to get about a significant amount of money to make promotion and marketing of the channel. So I'm looking forward to this as a, I hope, success. It's going to be, of course, 24/7 hours.
So just to underscore that, because it's really remarkable, this began as a half an hour a day newscast called Current Time. It then grew to a 6-hour stream because of the interest and demand in the content that was being produced both at VOA and at RFERL. And now, because of the demand, the cable operators and satellite operators throughout Eastern Europe and the Russian periphery are looking for us to develop an actual 24/7 cable channel in Russian language. So what Nenad and Tom will be launching later this year is, as far as I know, the first 24/7 cable channel owned and operated by the BBG. And it's going to be highly impactful in a part of the world that is critical for our mission. So, excellent. Not to mention the digital component that comes along with it. So from that, let's turn to Libby Liu and Radio Free Asia.
Just really quickly, John, just to note for the board and the media, John and I will be going to the region and visiting Nenad, you, and Tom in Prague, I think in 3 weeks, and then traveling to Moscow to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Bureau there. So looking forward to seeing all the good work in person. And Leon, you need to mute because you came back on and you're not muted anymore.
Sure. Yeah, I got disconnected. Sorry.
Thank you.
All right, Libby.
Okay, I was going to show some really cool multimedia things that we've done in the last month, but I'll just encourage you to go to our website and go look at Remembering Tiananmen and also the Uyghur Diaspora multimedia page because they're fabulous. But instead, I want to talk about North Korea. Radio Free Asia, as you know, has been doing a investigative series led by Bei Fong into North Korea's sources of hard currency. And, you know, we've had some good impact on that. One of the things that we've not talked about is the situation in Kuwait. We did report on the North Korean workers in Kuwait. After that, when their boss tried to pay them in scripts that could only be cashed in North Korea, they had a strike. So North Korea had to recall all of those workers, and now they've sent in 800 military people disguised as civilians. I mean, they actually had to grow their hair out and pretend to be migrant workers into Kuwait to earn currency for the regime. Simultaneous to that grief that we're giving them, we are the source for military buildup and movement in North Korea. Our stories, for example, we did a breaking report on military buildup near a nuclear facility last week, which was picked up by everybody because we do our reports based on satellite imagery and sources that are in the military in North Korea. So just want to put that on our radar because North Korea is a serious problem. I mean, I was delighted last week when I found out that their luxury watch imports have dropped to 0 this year. So sad for them. But I just want to let the board know about what we're doing with the North Koreans who condemned us in the UN last month, known by our enemies.
Thank you, Libby. Any questions for Libby? So turning to NBN, you may remember at our last meeting, Brian showed us a video on a new Al-Hura program that followed 4 women in Egypt that were working in traditionally male-dominated jobs. It was a really terrific video. It was called A Woman is Worth 1,000 Men, which of course all women already knew. But today Brian is going to give us an update on that project. So go ahead, Brian.
Thank you, John. Yeah, since our focus today is on impact, I thought it would be interesting. The first season of the program I showed at the last meeting is finished, but we went back and we interviewed the participants in the program, and we filmed what the program meant to them and how they thought it showed women versus how Egyptian media typically shows them. So it's a short 2-minute video. It just gives you an idea of what we think is the impact of this kind of unique content. Also, these interviews, we filmed them for the purposes of putting it on social media to extend the program, extend the brand. So we could.
ففعلا اللي اكتشفته من حلقات البرنامج دي واللي انا شفته من خلال التصوير مع الشخصيات التانية كمان ان قد ايه الست المصريه جدعه قوي، ودي حاجه عجبتني الحقيقه لان البرنامج اظهرها.
الموضوع الخلفه دي بالنسبه لي انا يعني في المجتمع المصري طبعا مش سهل نتكلم فيه. طبعا كنت متردده قوي في الموضوع ده، بس حسيت ان برضو في ناس برضو عندهم نفس المشكله ويعني ممكن اساعد. يعني الشكل البيجر بيكتشر اهم من الحاجات الصغيره الناس اللي هتزعل او هتحس ان دي حاجه الموضوع مش مفروض اقولها يعني تلفزيون وكده. الستات المصريات are strong.
هو برنامج ست ب100 راجل اثر في حياتي من ناحيه ان انا حسيت ان هو من الاول حسسني ان في ناس اهي مهتميه ان هي تعرف بقيه الستات. في ستات بتشتغل اهي وفي ناس بتتعب، اعملي زيهم او اعملي اي حاجه انت حباها.
الفكره ان ست اندبندنت وممكن تتصرف لوحدها مش محتاجه راجل، حاجات كده مش النورم في مصر. انا حاسه مش النورم، بس الستات هنا are very strong.
ردود الافعال بتاعت كل البنات اللي شافت البرنامج كانوا مبهورين ليه؟ لان دي اول مره برنامج يتكلم عن ستات مكافحه. ستات ابتدت من الصفر، ستات عايزة تغير في مجتمعها. يعني كل البرامج وكل المسلسلات بتتكلم على المودلز والمغنيات والممثلات، وأنا مبسوطة جدا إن الإعلام ابتدى يركز على هذه الفئة من السيدات، ودي حاجة كويسة جدا لأول مرة بتحصل، فبشكركم فعلا عن البرنامج.
We're in the process of starting to film season 2, where we will take similar women in walks of life and careers paths that aren't typically found in the Arab world. So we think this has a little more life to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. I think it's just a great example. We're seeing more and more around the BBG of content that is impactful and unique and can't be found on any other media outlet. And that's true about all 5 entities. And so, great example. Thank you. Before we move to the next item on the agenda, I wanted to introduce to you our new General Counsel, Acting General Counsel. Betsy Parrish has been a longtime lawyer for the BBG. Dave Kligerman, who was in the Acting General Counsel role, his detail expired, and so it was time to appoint another Acting General Counsel, and Betsy stepped up, and I'm really appreciative that she did because she's an outstanding lawyer and is already off to a great start. I'd also like to thank Dave for his service over 9 months and his detail. He served very well both as Acting General Counsel and as Board Secretary. Because a board meeting was upon us, we've decided to have Dave continue in the role of Acting Board Secretary while Betsy steps into the role of Acting General Counsel, and at the same time we'll be posting the full-time General Counsel position and hope to have that filled by our next board meeting. So with that said, I'd like to invite Betsy to just say hello so you can hear from her. And Betsy, welcome aboard.
Thank you, John. I'm excited to in this new way, and I look forward to working with everyone.
Thank you, Betsy. Switching now, a recent trip that I took along with Chief of Staff, Rob Fallon, Libby Liu, and our Director of Research and Assessment, Sonia Glockel, to the Global Media Forum in Bonn, Germany. I participated in a panel titled "The Future of International Broadcasting," of which I have no idea what the future of international broadcasting is. It may not even include broadcasting, for all I know. But it was really an informative meeting set in a really impressive former Parliament building in Bonn. I was able to make contacts there and had some very good meetings with the Director General Peter Limborg, and I appreciated his invitation to attend from Deutsche Welle. I also met with the European Endowment for Democracy Executive Director Yeze Pamanaski and the Channels Media Group Chairman from Nigeria, CEO John Momo. But I wanted to just give Rob, our Chief of Staff, a chance to update on some of the takeaways from this meeting, because I thought we had some really positive takeaways. Rob?
Sure thing. Thank you, John. Speaking to the panel and where it ended up driving, the other panelists, along with the CEO, were, as you mentioned, Peter Limburg from Deutsche Welle, Jean-Philippe de Tender from the European Broadcasting Union, and Cécile Magie from Radio France International. And I'd say that, to John's question of what is the future of international broadcasting, according to the panel, there was a lot of agreement, I'd say, on maybe 3 main points. The first is that it's needed now more than ever, and it's certainly relevant now, and it will be even more relevant in the next months and years to come for a number of reasons. Second, resources are going to be something which everybody's struggling with. We'll be seeking increases in, and we'll have to make a better case for. And that relates to the third point, which was, I think, the most important takeaway, was that every broadcaster around the table agreed that impact is going to be the driving force. If it is not already, will be the driving force for making the best possible case for resources, but also to make the best possible case for the efficacy of what we do, the importance of what we do. And I thought that was a really important point to take away. And it really kind of underlined a lot of the meetings that the CEO had and which Sonia had and I had at the working level. So I would just kind of take away those 3 main points.
And on the point of impact, I was very proud that Sonia has a head start, and our organization has a head start on developing an impact model, which you'll hear more about later today. And we had a lot of interest from our peers in international media as to how we develop the impact model, how we're measuring, and whether they can work with us in developing their own impact model. So it's the most important area for international media in terms of measurement, but also accountability back to the funders and the appropriators for the work that we're doing. And the BBG is internationally now in the lead in developing that impact approach to our work. Other meetings I've been having, external relation efforts to connect with and raise awareness of BBG's relevance and reach. On June 9th, I went to New York to meet with Dr. Richard Haas of the Council on Foreign Relations and the leadership at the Committee to Protect Journalists. Dr. Haas was really an important opportunity for us to reposition the agency as a critical public policy tool with a major foreign policy influencer. Dr. Haas was interested in our strategic direction and expressed interest in further collaboration with us as we stand up our new policy team under Jeff Trimble. The leadership team at the Committee to Protect Journalists was a meeting I was very happy to get, mostly to thank them for their work in helping with the release of Hadija. They're a very scrappy, smart, effective group of journalists who go into hard places and do hard things in the interest of journalists that are willing to put their lives on the line in the advancement of open societies and a free media. And so to partner with the Committee to Protect Journalists is something that we're very, very proud of, and we had discussions on how we could further partner with them. And then just an update as I begin to wrap up, the Nathanson Scholars Program, if you remember, Mark Nathanson and his wife Jane funded a program for the BBG, donated it for 6 of our executives, emerging top-tier executives, to attend on scholarship to attend the Aspen Institute to further enhance their leadership skills. And so we went through a very exhaustive process at all 5 entities as well as the IBB. And here are the people who have been selected. Carolyn Prasuti from the VOA News Center, Doug Boynton, Director of Marketing, Emilio Vasquez, OCB Staff Director, Glenn Cates, Managing Editor for Digital at RFE-RL, Bei Fang, who's here with us and will be on our panel later, Managing Director for Northeast Asia, Radio Free Asia, and Fadou Massad, MBN's Managing Editor for Al Hurra and Radio Sawa. So they'll be traveling to the Aspen Institute in Aspen from July 8th to July 11th to participate in a Socratic program. So again, on behalf of the board, Chairman Schell, I want to thank Mark and Jane for their generosity in offering this opportunity to these wonderful future leaders to forge a more effective, impactful, and transformative future for the BBG. And with that, I end my report.
And great. Let me add, Mark's a longtime friend of mine, and I'll pass it along, and it's very generous of him. So any questions for John from the governors or non-governors? Oh, okay. So the board's going to take I think it says in my notes, 15-minute break. We're going to go shorter because we're running out of time. Yeah, so let's take a 5-minute break to get set up. People stay close, and we'll get going as soon as we're ready for the next panel, which is going to discuss a range of issues, including the BBG's impact model. Thanks. You wave to me when you guys are mic'd, and we'll get going.
Yeah. Tight though.
I know, we're not allowed to.
40 seconds.
Not in this forum. I have done some for the university.
I didn't know you were a war correspondent.
I already know.
Oh, what?
Enough.
You were a war
This is
correspondent.
my third administration.
Yeah, we were out there together.
We met in Afghanistan. Hardly makes any sense.
Afghanistan and
try my best. Did you watch the movie? What is it? Tina Fey movie? It's actually my friend.
Ooh, the yellow's good.
Kim Barker. Kim Barker. Yeah.
we worked together.
It's not lemon, it's something else. Coconut or mango. All right. You're eating Starburst, accusing each other of eating all the red ones. Important thing. So are we ready to go, John?
Yes, we are.
All right, take it away.
Thank you. Welcome back to the BBG board meeting and to our Impact Summit. As you know, you've heard me speak about it in the past. Back in the first week of February, we held an Impact Summit for the entire BBG, including all the entity heads, all the research directors, all the content producers, and worked on establishing a model of consistent measurement of impact across all of our media projects.
He's got a mic on his lapel, so we're doing the best we can, Leon. Let's keep going.
Okay, thanks.
That has developed now into an actual impact model that we have through our research director, who you'll hear about in a minute, developed that grew out of that summit. Now, I want to introduce you to our panel today. We're going to talk about how impact is being directed around the BBG from our 5 entities and how we're measuring that impact and what it means to have impact around the BBG. But first, let me introduce our panel. First, closest to me is Sonia Glockel, who's our IBB Director of Research and the leader, our executive leader of our impact model project. And as we've learned in Germany, thanks to Sonia's work, we're a leader internationally in this all-important effort. So thank you for that, Sonia. Next, Ernest Torriero, Director of VOA Extremism Watch Desk, which has a lot of interesting reasons to have impact, and even more so now that Amanda Bennett has you on the front page of the VOA English website. So thank you for that, Amanda. Natalia Carreras, Chief Content Officer of OCB. Let's see, Daisy Sindelar, the Regional Director for Europe-Russia Specialist, RFERL. Bei Fang, Managing Director for Northeast Asia and RFA. And Nada Alwadi, Community Manager, Raise Your Voice, MBN. And Raise Your Voice is one of our best examples, I think, of having really measurable impact. So I'm going to start with Sonia. And now Sonia can go all day on the subject. I'm going to ask her to do it mostly in like about a buck and a half, 90 seconds. But impact is a lot of things, but what's the most important thing to you about developing impact and measuring impact so that it's meaningful?
I think what made impact so very meaningful for us is, and I should probably be prefacing this by saying I might be sitting here today, but really there were at least my fellow research directors at all the networks involved, as well as the 30 people, and ultimately it was the entire organization that was involved in creating the BBG impact model. What I like about impact at the BBG is how very straightforward it really is. It is directly derived from our mission statement. Really the way we look at impact is, do we inform, engage, and connect people around the world in support of freedom and democracy, no more, no less.
So talk about how we aligned our impact model with our mission. I think that's something the board would find fascinating.
Sure, and in fact, I brought you a couple of slides here because it is so that we can see how it works in action. So as I had said, the BBG impact is directly aligned with our mission. You can see it here. We have 3 pillars of impact. We have inform, engage and connect, and be influential in support of freedom and democracy. This, in the abstract, it might look a little bit strange, so I actually brought you a case study. Looking at how the impact model works in action, we're looking at Burundi. It's a country where we recently had got fresh data from. This is all from a February 2016 survey. If we look at inform, we're looking at, do we reach target audiences? And in Burundi, that is certainly the case because we're reaching over half the adult population on a weekly basis. But and in the past we used to sort of stop there.
That's reach.
That's reach. But we go much further. We're looking at, do we provide value to these audiences? And in fact, 9 in 10 weekly users in Burundi agree that they find the content on VOA trustworthy. Moving on to whether we engage and connect our audiences in Burundi, 9 in 10 weekly users say they share something they heard on VOA on a regular basis. Obviously, this not only means that our content is being amplified, but also it lends credibility. If you share something, you're already more or less endorsing it. We are looking to engage and connect the local media market, not just people, but also organizations. And here in Burundi, in November 2015, we held a security training for journalists, and there will be more trainings to come, which will allow not only our own stringers, but also journalists from local affiliate stations and other media organizations in Burundi to better cover what is going on in the country in crisis. Then one more way of looking at if we engage and connect our audiences is if we create loyalty. And in fact, 94% of our weekly users in Burundi say they continue planning on using VOA. Moving on to the assessment of if we are being influential with people first and foremost. And in fact, 95% of weekly VOA users in Burundi say that thanks to listening to VOA, their understanding of current events has increased. And finally, are we influential with media or government? And here we have a quote from the former president of Burundi, who says that the country is lucky to have VOA at a time when they really critically needed balanced views. So this is how the impact model works in a nutshell.
Great, thank you, Sonia. So rather than go down the line, I want to skip around a little bit. So Bay, I'm going to come to you first. When I was a journalist in the field and a news director, I always valued investigative journalism very highly because there's nothing more impactful than changing the way a government works or a city council works based on investigative reporting. I know you're the same, have similar beliefs. So talk about how your editorial leadership is leading to impact in the RFA part of the world.
Thanks so much for that. So what we have tried to do with the investigative series is really look at issues that we think will be driving the commentary in years to come. So for example, in China, what we're doing, we noticed that a lot of the protests that have been going on have been economic in nature in a way that wasn't the case 5-10 years ago. So we actually are focusing our China investigative series on a financial scam, basically, that has been going on for the last year, and that has actually driven a lot of protests. And we're basically the only ones to really go really deeply into this scam. And we found that it's actually really resonated, especially with middle-class people in China, who feel like they suddenly have more money and more ability to make more money, and they want to actually find sort of different financial vehicles to invest in, and so they've actually been really responding to our coverage, and while we've been doing this, there have actually been a group of people who arrested who just did a citizen's arrest of the CEO of this company. There have been others who have staged protests outside of the provincial hall, and so it really has had a real effect on the conversation.
So those are like visceral examples of impact, right?
Exactly. And then, Libby talked about our North Korean coverage, and we found out that there are upwards of 50,000 workers who are overseas, and so we sent reporters to Tanzania, to Kuwait. There'll be others going to Cambodia and Mongolia. And in the wake of our reporter actually doing these stories that expose these sort of sham hospitals that North Korea workers have set up in Tanzania, the South Korean ambassador saw our story, went to the Minister of Health, and basically the Minister of Health went and shut them down.
Very good, very good. So Ernie, one of the things we hear the most, and appropriately so, is how well are we doing covering violent extremism and pushing against that narrative. You have launched the Violent Extremism Watch Desk, which is essentially a assignment desk that takes in all of the various reporting on violent extremism. It makes it available to every service in the VOA. What are you seeing coming in through there? What are you learning, and how do you measure impact through the Watch Desk?
Well, John, I think one of the first things I want to talk about is that great journalism always produces impact. It's a byproduct of what we do. It flows right out of us. And at VOA, I was really interested. I was going around to each of the services, and every single day, they're working on impact. They are planning for impact. They have two-way conversations with their audiences talking about impact. And what we do on our Watch Desk is we have 9 staffers who speak 13 different languages, who gather their information in language from our language services: Turkish, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Kurdish, African services, Asia services. We pull all that stuff in and we're looking at it. We get stories other people don't because we're reporting in the language. Our job then is to reversion it to have impact, both in English through our central news, English social media, English digital, English online, that whole bit. But more importantly, we don't translate stories back in language. We write them in the language because people talk differently in the language than they would in English. And we've had great success at it. In the 9 months we've been in operation, we've had nearly 500 products, if you call them, stories, videos, audios, online social media. We find that we have dramatic impact because VOA sets viral fires in language. That is very, very crucial. We're not doing this just in English. The impact model has to look at way beyond what we do.
Right. Thank you. Well said, actually, Ernie. So Daisy and Nada, I want to take up a subject with both of you because you're both doing such interesting and good work in your parts of the world. If you recall from the Impact Summit, we had this conversation about how impact shouldn't be an accident of good fortune. That we should actually plan our journalism so that we have impact in mind on the other end. Mm-hmm. So Raise Your Voice is a good example of that, and certainly the Digim team and the Current Time effort that you've done. Start with you, Daisy, but talk about how you think about impact before people go out the door to create the journalism.
Well, if we're going to talk about Digim in particular, I think something that they've been really effective at is what I would consider sort of medium-term impact, where you're not just responding to a news event and providing coverage of something in a reactive way, but you're really tapping into conversations that already exist. And this has been particularly important for us in Russia, where we often are dealing with communities who are very isolated from each other and certainly isolated from us outside looking in. And something that they've been very successful with recently in terms of impact are products that deal specifically with the issues of corruption and budgetary lapses in Russia, and particularly at a local level, how this affects ordinary people. And I can give you one specific example. They do this very well by tapping into conversations that are already taking place on social media, and then they amplify it. So the example I wanted to give was the case of medical workers in a sort of small or medium-sized industrial city in central Russia, where people are guaranteed a certain state salary and suddenly were receiving salaries that were far less than what they had been promised. They were receiving maybe $240 a month instead of their usual salary of $450 a month. I just want to point out the numbers because they're already very low salaries to begin with. And this was happening with no explanation. These medical workers responded by doing something very brave. They posted a video online that was an appeal to Vladimir Putin saying, can you intervene in this situation? We really need help. When something like that happens, what happened here was the usual thing. Local administrators immediately get involved and say, oh, this is a terrible mistake, and we'll correct it immediately. So Current Time, which had already been covering this story, did a clever thing. They sat back. The news about the story died down for a while, and they went back a month later to check up and see, well, have things changed? And in fact, they had changed, but not nearly enough. There had been small incremental changes to people's salaries, but in the amount of just $16, just a pittance. So they went back and created a new product that sort of dipped into the original video appeal, but conducted new interviews with these people, gave facts and statistics about the economic situation in this part of Russia. And the product did very well. It got, I would say, 630,000 views. It was also picked up by Russian influentials, anti-corruption crusaders like Alexei Navalny, which just sort of amplifies its exposure. But the really interesting thing for us was that it took a conversation that was going on at a local level and turned it into a countrywide conversation, so that people were writing into Current Time and saying the same thing is happening to me, and they were scanning their pay stubs so they could show, yes, I'm not receiving nearly the salary that I've been guaranteed. And one of the women, one of these medical workers who appeared in the original video, had something very interesting to say. She said, when I recorded this video, I thought this was only happening to me and my friends. Once it was posted online and we began to see the kinds of clicks and comments that we were getting, we realized that this is happening everywhere in Russia. And I think that's really important in a place like Russia, where state television dominates the narrative and does not give voice, obviously, to people who are not receiving their salaries, who are otherwise disenfranchised. And so with a product like these videos, you are creating a community connection between these very isolated groups of people who otherwise are just completely left out of the overall narrative that's presented by Russian TV. I think that's a very powerful form of impact.
It's incredibly powerful. Thank you, Daisy. It actually leads to NADA and the idea of bringing communities together, which is essentially the definition of raise your voice. Right?
Exactly, yeah. We actually, it's amazing because the raise your voice has actually the advantage of the digital media, which is the two-way engagement. So this is exactly what we do. This is what the job that I do every day with my colleagues. We actually engage in discussions directly with people on the ground in the Middle East, discussing obviously extremism and violence and terrorism. And in fact, I do believe as journalists and media, if you are covering the Middle East, you can't ignore that particular issue. Now, it is actually affecting everyone. We see it every day in the discussions we have with these people. And in fact, the two-way engagement gives us the advantage of deriving our content from these particular discussions, which happens also all the time. I remember I have live stream through Facebook with our audiences every week. So and these live streams will be driven from the discussions we have on Facebook. So for example, a few weeks back I interviewed an activist, a Saudi woman activist, talking about women issues and women empowerment issues in Saudi Arabia and the legal problem there. And it was amazing. The amount of people, I was actually live on the live stream receiving all these comments from people from around the Middle East, actually discussing women issues and kind of challenging what she was saying. And I would ask her that question or the comment, and she will comment. And then, in fact, the discussion continued for like 3 days after the live stream, because it reached everybody, and they knew that somebody is listening, and it matters to them. Also, another example, it reminded me of an example that we did actually last week on the engagement. The two-way engagement leads us to report differently on issues. So, for example, the Orlando event that happened, and everybody was reporting on it. So I was here, I attended an iftar that was organized by a Muslim community in Washington, D.C., and I was doing a live stream. I was wearing a traditional dress, trying to kind of appeal to the Middle Eastern audiences that, oh, there are Muslims here and they are doing iftars and doing that. And during that iftar, there was a 1-minute prayer silence for the victims of the Orlando attack. And I took that particular, there was a lot of engagement on that live stream. Afterwards, I took that particular minute and I did a video on that. video of the prayer of the Muslims in DC to basically pray for the victims in Orlando. And that was an amazing way to see how people actually reacted to it, because first I knew that they would be interested in this. I knew my audience. I basically talked to them and I discussed these things, and I know that this will reach something on the discussions that is always going on the discussion. So yeah, I feel that the reports that we do, the two-way reporting, which is basically taking the discussion from people and giving back what they want, has been extremely effective. I feel that in Raise Your Voice, especially for the mission that we are doing, discussing very sensitive issues, extremely sensitive. Sometimes people will be very critical. They will challenge you. They will use, theological rhetoric and religious verses to kind of support their ideologies, as taking them as a given. And then when you discuss back, and not just you, all the community on the online community will discuss with you. We feel it. We see it every single day. Like these ideas that people take as a given, they try to kind of rethink it and look at it from a different angle. And it has been really a fascinating, interesting experience, I guess, dealing with audience directly. And digital media gives you that opportunity, actually.
So that's excellent. So Natalia, how much would you like to have that kind of interaction with your audience in Cuba?
We have it. We don't have it in, as you know, the internet in Cuba. Only perhaps 400,000 people have access to the internet, and it's heavily censored. So we don't have that immediate exchange. We do have it in social media, especially in Facebook, but we have it in other means too, via email. There's more than 2.5 million Cubans that have access to email, and they write to our shows, they call our shows. And to us, for instance, our radio programs, in every single program, there's an exchange with people on the island over the phone. And when you think about the legal system on the island, could put someone up to 10 years in prison for delivering information that is considered unauthorized. So anyone that will come and do a denuncia, complain about something happening in their neighborhood, they come to Marti every day without fear because they want a solution for their problem. That to us is a double element of impact. They're calling us, but also they're facing this fear. But I wanted to elaborate on that in ways that we also touch into social media, going back to the island, a bit of what you were saying, and also tapping into what Daisy was saying of this continuing covering a particular topic. Malula mentioned briefly in our highlights about the Cuban migrant crisis happening in Central America. Actually, Marti journalists starting noticing this different trend of immigration outside of Cuba, going instead of through the natural boats, through land. Going all the way from Ecuador to the U.S. and facing all types of troubles, from walking in the jungle, pregnant women and children, to being tapped by drug trafficking. So almost 2 years ago, we started this coverage when no one was noticing it, and eventually last year we actually earned an Emmy for the documentary we did on this. But we continue covering this, and just last week, our reporter Ricardo Quintana went to this little town in Turbo, Colombia, where in one particular place, more than 500 Cubans are stranded with no access to elementary needs. As he was walking, he was telling us that he was walking towards the place where they're taking shelter. People came out because they saw the flag of Marti, and they started yelling, "Marti is here! Marti is here!" with a sense of hope. So that idea of you're relating to your audience and you're earning that trust. And when you think about how impact should be considered, how you're influential to people, to media, and to governments, this example to us is wonderful, because the leader of that organization, of the migrants in that community, told our reporter on camera that after we ran our reports on it, then finally local authorities paid attention. UN migrant representatives came to see their situation, and they felt like things were happening. And other media outlets cover the story. So that to us is a good example of how, because you follow a story, you care, the audience trusts you, then you can really influence other media and governments to take action.
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead, Irv.
And also, John, we found that two-way, this back and forth, gives voice to people who normally don't have voices. Right. Afghan women talk to VOA's Afghan service on a weekly basis to a show where they ask women about their struggles. Women, as you know, in that part of the world, never had any voice, never had any impact. Here they're talking about how to obtain small business loans, things like that. Our Cambodia service, the Khmer service, has a back and forth where every month they touch on the same topic, including regional Asian migrants who come from Cambodia who are in some other countries struggling. In that conversation, the VOA is able to hook them up with NGOs that can help them with their problems. So there's a mirage of this two-way, but all this comes from pre-planning for impact, which is going on all over the place, even right now as we're meeting here. Let me give you a quick example. VOA did a compelling project on African migrants fleeing Africa and their struggles. In the pre-planning stage, VOA actually planned in 10 different languages to quote-unquote simplify or dumb down their digital presence so that Africans who may think of fleeing can pick it up on their crude cell phones. The impact was dramatic because our audience, what we were aiming at, was those people who actually might be fleeing. The only way to get to them was through a rudimentary technology.
Very good. So we should begin wrapping up, but I want to maybe bring it back to Sonia here. And Sonia, with considering our board and how we can hold ourselves accountable to the board for impact, what would it look like to be reporting across all these various entities? Maybe talk about the 80-20 rule a little bit. And
Absolutely.
What can the board expect out of all this?
The board can expect hard data out of 80% of our markets, because I think in order to hold ourselves honest, we need the data. There is, of course, and Libby had already alluded to this earlier, North Korea, Tibet, Xinjiang region. There are Eritrea. There are markets where we cannot get hard data out. Cuba currently. Yes, so there are markets where we, instead of providing nationally representative data, we use other data sources such as refugee surveys, etc. But in order to provide a holistic picture, I think data itself is not enough. You need the stories, you need the context, and that's what you heard today from all the networks.
Right. Okay, let me open it up. Jeff, any governors, questions, comments?
Let me start just with a quick one. First of all, thank you guys all for being here. I actually think this is the most important thing that we will discuss or do. We know that we do a lot of work at all of your organizations as far as journalism. We also suspect that perhaps we aren't being as impactful as we can be with that great journalism. So I guess my question would be, to me, I think there's three things. There's research. There's Gallup. There's that. There's engagement. Fortunately, the digital stuff that you guys are talking about allows you to be much more cognizant of what the impact is. But my fear is that engagement is within a group that is open to our story and not to the groups we're actually trying to reach that are not open to our story. And so I guess my question would be, how much do you supplement the traditional tools you've talked about with, and by the way, it's hard in all of our regions. We don't have any specific things, so this is not an easy question, but do we talk to ambassadors and people at the State Department who are in region? Do we go out and talk to, in any meaningful way, people who are hostile to our views and try to figure out if we're having an impact there with those kind of consumers?
Who would like to take that?
I'd be happy to. You're definitely right. It is extremely difficult to see if we are talking to the people who are already open to our content, or if we're looking at the people who might not be open to receiving content from us. One thing the impact model really doesn't go into is causality. We are stopping short of causality because we're looking at what we can actually do and what we cannot do. We don't want to go out and saying people have changed their mind based on solely consuming BBG content. And I think with that we are in line with what other international broadcasters are doing and what other US government agencies are doing. So.
If I can take that too also. So with Raise Your Voice, especially because we report on Middle East, and honestly in the digital sphere we get a lot of, or some of the anti-American sentiment comments all the time, so they actually follow us. They come and they respond and they talked with us, and We have a lot of pro-ISIS people actually even discussing the idea of ISIS for them on our platforms. We go back and we engage and we kind of break down the ideology that supports their own ideas. And so I think for us, we actually get a lot of the people who are not necessarily or the regulars on to hear what we want to say, but they come to us. So.
And also, Jeff, the other way we are doing it is through unique journalism. For example, we're doing a lot of Facebook Live. When you're in that digital world, it's a whole level playing field. So you're going after people who normally are not your audience. For example, in Turkey, we've got a closing media society to be charitable. VOA has done streaming Facebook Live of the Turkish president coming here where there's been scuffles between his entourage and our entourage, the U.S. entourage, things where he's not very happy. We're getting dramatic impact just by streaming that live to audiences that are not normally our audience.
Thank you. Ryan, why don't you jump in here?
Well, first, thanks for a great presentation. One of my key takeaways is what a powerful argument what you said this morning is for the shift to digital, because it is interactive, because it both makes and measures impact. So it's certainly another talking point in my repertoire. That was a great question, Mr. Chairman, and some good answers. I would just say that my takeaway from that is we've got to be sure we're thinking about the audiences we may not have but really want. And it's kind of an ongoing analytical question. I think it is important to engage embassies and others on that. What kind of message, what kind of content is likely just to tweak the interest of someone that's not part of the 9 out of 10 in Burundi who think VOA is really great. So just to kind of continually be running through in our minds what that content needs to be on an interactive platform. Nada, that's terrific. Every ISIS supporter that wants to engage us, that is terrific. Yeah. But just to think through globally what the content should be that starts to engage the interest of the manifestly non-converted.
Well, one of the ideas that we had at RFA in our new Mandarin TV program was how to reach out to younger audiences, especially students in China, because we found that the stalwarts were all sort of older people, and so for our 50th anniversary of the Cultural Revolution programming, we actually decided to go. One of our reporters went on WeChat, the Chinese social media, and just blasted out a request for questions sent by video with young people all over China, and the results were astounding. I mean, we got these videos. One guy actually filmed himself asking this question because, basically what they said was that they have no education about the Cultural Revolution. They have no idea what happened then. And so one guy actually filmed himself on Tiananmen Square asking the question of, what actually happened and if China is actually trying to make itself accountable for it, then this portrait behind him of Chairman Mao should actually be torn down. So they asked all these questions by video, and then we actually had an interactive session where we had experts in the studio kind of telling them about it. So it was a really good way of reaching out to students.
If I could just have a quick follow-up on that. What would be really terrific is, in response to this programming on the Cultural Revolution if you got an outraged response from a young Communist Party member who says this is all imperialist propaganda? Because if she does that, then you've got her. So it's thinking about if we can enrage them into a response, that's fine with me. But it's
We
get
plenty of those,
I
right?
love it.
Can I jump in with a comment too, just to get back to Chairman Schell's original question? Which is a really excellent question, because it's a reminder to all of us that preaching to the choir is never quite enough, and that's something that we have to be vigilant about, especially as a mission-driven organization. And I know that you're soon to travel to Moscow with John, and that's a place where we have long had, frankly, an antagonistic relationship with the government. But we have recently had real success in reaching out to them, where they have criticized us for some of our coverage, and rather than dismissing it, we have encouraged them to engage with us. So several months ago, we had an in-studio interview with the spokeswoman for the foreign ministry, who is a real bulldog defender of Putin and the values of the Russian government. To get her into our studio was a tremendous coup. We had a live interview that went half an hour over schedule. She stayed, she engaged, she was feisty. It was a good interview. It did very well. And since then, we have taken steps to engage back, that we're getting more involved in events that are organized by the foreign ministry, to show that we are not determined to block out their message as well. And actually, we're hopeful that she will be attending some of the events that you'll be attending while you're in Moscow.
I would like to elaborate very briefly, if I may, that one of the examples that we have found that could really help us reach out to that particular group of audience that will usually not listen to us, because obviously we have the same situation that Daisy has with being antagonist to our government in our market, is going beyond the regular hard news to more social concerns. And things that affect everybody, from pollution in the water to lack of access to medical care. And we notice that particularly with journalists that work in official media, there's interactivity under the ground with our journalists, and they exchange information via social media, private information. And later on, we see reports that Marti started talking about being amplified or analyzed in independent bloggers. So these same people that work in official media, and we see, are growing into pushing more independent voices outside. And we have an open communication with them. It's just not open. It's on the ground in social media, especially in Facebook.
The fact that Marti was part of the negotiation over opening up Cuba was very gratifying, because it meant it was having an impact. John, we have a couple more governor questions, and I know we have Facebook questions, and we shouldn't just broadcast live on Facebook and not take a couple. So, Rob, after Governor Kempner and Governor Armstrong ask their questions, pick your best Facebook question and ask it. You get to curate yourself. So, Governor Kempner?
Yeah, just very briefly. First off, every time, John, you have one of these panels with your extraordinarily impressive team, I'm just sorry the whole country isn't watching, because it would so dramatically change the narrative about both the quality of the people we have working on these critical issues, as well as the results and impact we're having. With that said, so what you've done here is incredibly impressive, both what you're doing and even how you talk about it, so people can understand it. But we do end up with something that's not nearly as metric-oriented as the rest of the program, and that is something called Be Influential. Now, that's kind of hard to decide what that means. So I know we're taking this, as I don't even say a step at a time. You're doing this 20 steps at a time, so the progress has been extraordinary. But at some point, it would be good to put some metrics up against what Be Influential means, so we actually know whether we're hitting those metrics or not, because at the end of the day, I think that will be critical. Totally understand if we're not there yet, but I would like to see us work towards defining that a little bit more.
Thank you for your comment, Michael, Governor Kempner. We agree with you on that, and we're currently in the process of breaking influential down into pieces. So influential with local media, influential with local government, influential with audiences. So a brief example of that is Bay's investigative report in Laos on water pollution caused by Chinese businesses that the local media wouldn't report on for fear of the government. But when RFA reported on it, it gave cover for the local media to report on it. So it's still a little anecdotally based, but I think we can get to what you're asking for by breaking it into those kind of pieces. Citizens, governments, media, how do we affect those by being influential?
Thanks, and again, really congratulations. The work is tremendous.
And I've got an answer also to that question. We find we're influential with our VOA brand. When the newly elected president of Nigeria took office, his first interview was with VOA. The reason he did that, he said to VOA in his own words, is the first thing he does when he gets up in the morning at 6 a.m. is to listen to VOA. And because of VOA's balanced and principled reporting, this is a long brand. It's been going on a long time. This is the station, he said, he fears. Now, I don't know what metrics you got to prove that, but I like that quote.
I appreciate that. That's actually a perfect segue into. I really just have a comment. What you're talking about here is really fantastic, and it really differentiates us, and this is the collective us, the BBG network or family of entities, from commercial enterprises. You're very much focused on enfranchising and empowering the public and local media operations. We are not driven by commercial interests. We want to build audiences, but first and foremost, we are empowering and enfranchising them. And I think it's part of our story that has been lost and forgotten, and I think it's part of the mission that has generally been lost and forgotten. So this whole discussion here, I see it as returning us to our mission and returning our narrative, why we exist, why simply piping in commercial product into these locations doesn't work. And you're telling the story, your impact is based on our reporters on the ground from the place, not parachuting in, understanding what the audience needs, not just what sells a click. So you change the equation, and there are really very few operations that are like this. And this is why I say this whole organization, BBG, we have no peer. BBC is not our peer. Deutsche Welle is not our peer. We are unique, and this discussion just amplifies that. So I appreciate where you're going with this, and keep it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate it. So I know we have some time constraints. So Rob, you want to take us to a Facebook Live question?
Yeah, and I would just cap it with we've been getting a lot of them coming in, and so I would just urge people to continue sending them for the next board meetings. It's, I think, a great process. So rather than ask the bunch that came in, I'll just ask a question in two parts. I'm doing my best to curate here. The first is, I think, Sonia, right to you, which is impact limited solely to just numbers? I think Ernie sort of just addressed this, but I think take that one, and then I'll just do the second one here, which is perhaps maybe for Bay and Natalia, have we thought about thinking about diaspora populations and whether those are a place to both achieve impact that might be measurable and perhaps not measurable, but impactful nonetheless? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, the answer is certainly not. It is not limited to just numbers. On the other hand, I do strongly believe that numbers are important because they give us comparability and they give us credibility. But in order to get the full picture, in order to understand the context of the very different markets that we operate in, you do ultimately rely on things that we call them anecdotes, but I would also call them verifiable anecdotes. These are not things that are just flying around. We can see if our news is picked up. We have quotes from presidents on file. So these are stories, but they're real, proven stories.
And also, I've got one other anecdote to wrap that up. I don't think sometimes impact can always be measured through numbers. We did a story on a woman who was fleeing ISIS. The entourage hit a landmine. Her face was blown off. Through a series of stories we did, she's getting the help in Europe that she needed, to make a long story short. How do you measure saving somebody's face?
Well, telling after that is hard, pero with the idea of how you help these people connect to others. In Marti, we care a lot about the diaspora. There's more than 2 million Cubans living outside, and they have very close relationship with the people inside the island. These are their parents, their kids. They talk to them every day. So we reach to the diaspora in different ways. First, engaging in social media is a big way. Also, we build affiliate and content exchange relations with local media that broadcast in markets where Cuban Americans live, and also that is sent to Cuba. And a lot of our content is picked up every day. They ask us for daily packages that we produce from the island that air in these networks. And in the part of helping, we just had a story recently, I'm going to be very brief, in which it was a particular family that was in a terrible need for medical care, and through our programming, a Cuban American foundation was able to help them and send them the resources that they needed. So in that way, Marti helps as a bridge, not only to bring awareness about the medical system in Cuba, but also to help Cuban Americans in the diaspora help their people in the island.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons, looking at the diaspora, it's one of the reasons that we spent a lot of time ramping up our Tibetan election coverage, because this was basically, an amazing feat. It was an election in exile for a government in exile. And there was a lot of interest both in the sort of diaspora community and inside Tibet. And so we were the only ones who actually did a live TV debate between the two candidates for prime minister, and we basically had the most media coverage of any of the international broadcasters.
Okay, I think we should probably wind down, Chairman Schell. Any final comments, or we can just end it here?
Ambassador Crocker has one final comment.
Okay.
Thank you. I want to echo Governor Kempner's comment that he wished the entire country could have seen this. I wish they had too. I wish any number of countries could have seen you, not just because of what you said, but because of who said it. 5 out of 6 of the panelists are female. 3 of our 5 entity heads are female. Who we are is a powerful message, and I want to look for ways to get that out. Now, if we could just do something to get a few more governors who are not white males, we'd be in great shape. Thank you.
All right.
Happy to resign. Actually, not happy to resign. I want to echo that a little bit too. It's very inspiring. I mean, I'm doing a lot of reminiscing this morning. But when we started these board meetings 4 years ago, all we did was Robert's Rules of Order and talking about different procedural things. And to actually get here and hear real people talking about real things that are in some cases really dangerous, and in all cases really brave and inspiring, is fantastic. So congratulations to all of you guys.
Thank you. Good job, panel.
Thank you.
Remember, you have a mic on. Good job, guys.
So, John, while you're getting kind of organized up there, I'm gonna conclude the meeting. So the next BBG board meeting is scheduled to be held here in Washington, D.C. on September 29th. As always, I'll work closely with all of you guys to put together the agenda. If anybody has any agenda items they wish to discuss at that meeting, please let John or Rob or I know. In the meantime, any governor wish to move that we adjourn the meeting? I hear you, Leon. Do you want to move that we adjourn?
I do.
Okay. Any second? Second, Matt Armstrong. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks very much.